How's it going, guys? It's Chucky here. Minecraft's history of usernames and accounts is a very long and complicated one. I've talked plenty about this in the past in other videos of mine, stuff like how duplicate accounts are created, or how invalid accounts returned to the game just a few weeks ago. But all of this is about the creation of them. I've never really talked in full about how some rare and OG names have been entirely lost from the community, and how many accounts have been rendered entirely inaccessible by Mojang themselves. So in this video, that's exactly what I'm going to be going over. Over time, Mojang has been known to both automatically and manually lock accounts, preventing players from being able to use them anymore. But over the years, they've made plenty of mistakes with this, and the community has even been known to fight back and reclaim their accounts. So in this video, I'll be going over all the times that Mojang has attacked the community and removed access to many accounts, including completely innocent players' accounts. I'll also be going into how the community snapped back at Mojang to reclaim some of their names, how all this affected the community as a whole, and how it ultimately led to thousands of OG names being completely lost with very little chance of them ever being recovered. The whole thing has seemed almost like an ongoing civil war between Mojang and the OG community, so there's a huge amount of history on this dating all the way back to around 2015, so make sure to stick around to the end of the video for all the info. This video will also likely be a little different to some of my others. I've written it in more of a documentary style, and the script turned out to be 10 pages long, so make sure to strap in, grab your movie watching snack of choice, and enjoy the video. And super quickly before I get into the video, I just want to say a massive thank you for helping me reach 16,000 subs. The support on my channel has been absolutely insane, and I never thought I'd get to this point, but I just seem to keep growing, and it really is just super hard to comprehend for me. So if you want to support me and also spend some time interacting with a super friendly and helpful community, you can join my Discord server with the link that will be on screen and at the top of the description. You can also follow my Twitter at IGNChucky, and finally, while there is a huge amount of you guys here already, almost 90% of you guys aren't subscribed, so it would mean a whole lot if you could click the red button down below and help me on my way to 30,000 subscribers. But with that out of the way, please enjoy the video. Alright, so to start off the video, I want to give all the new viewers around here a little bit of context by going into what locking actually is, why it happens, and how it actually works. Well, to start off, many of you will know that like all other companies, Mojang has its own TOS and EULA. These are essentially documents that detail everything you can and can't do with their game, such as not using their name in commercial use and being generally respectful when you're playing or publishing footage of their game. But the most important thing for us is that one major rule in the EULA, which in essence states that you are not allowed to redistribute their game to anyone else, especially if you're making money from it. So in the simplest terms, you are not allowed to sell Minecraft accounts. Whether it be regular alt accounts, OG accounts, or cape accounts, it is against their rules, meaning Mojang does have full rights to remove access to accounts that violate these terms. But as you may have realized, nobody really pays attention to this. Minecraft accounts are sold every single day on many different websites such as OG Users, MC Market, and even in just random Discord servers and other websites, so it really isn't uncommon. In all honesty, there are a lot of people who do get away with it. If it's kept private and you don't announce it to the world that you bought your account, Mojang seems to have a hard time picking it up. But for the times that they have noticed, what did they do to the sold accounts? Well, that's where locking comes in. Locking is very similar to what I talked about in my last video, soft deletion. It's a term created by the community which essentially means that your access to the account has been completely taken away. Mojang changes the email and password to the account so only they have the ability to give you access back if it turns out that it was falsely locked. The phrase itself, locking, is also more of an umbrella term given to it. From Mojang's perspective, locking is actually a multitude of things. It's done as a means of punishment for accounts that violate the TOS, or as a way to secure accounts that seem to have been compromised. All you need to know for now though is that if there's any amount of evidence that an account has been hacked or resold, Mojang does have the right to revoke the owner's access to it. But jumping back to what locking actually is, what can you actually do with a locked account? Well, the answer is not much. It's important to note that the account does still exist. A locked account such as Poland is still viewable in every part of the API, and is still viewable perfectly fine on NameMC. But that's basically where the perks end. If you were to try and log into your account, you're met with a notice saying that the email and password is incorrect. It's the same on the launcher and on the Mojang website, meaning that you can't check the info for the account, change the skin, or most importantly for this video, change the name of the account. It's literally just what the name describes. You're locked out of your account. Again, websites like NameMC still do work, which leads to accounts such as Ace. It's been locked for 3 years, but the owner still pays for NameMC Emerald on the account, and pulls over 4,000 views a month on the profile. You can also see how the skin hasn't been changed since it was locked back in early 2017, and very obviously, the name remains the same. But regardless of that, seeing as the account is essentially owned by Mojang, you can't even receive system emails from them, such as password resets for your account, which is actually a good way of telling if your account is locked, but again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's say the account Burbo is locked for whatever reason. Because the email and password was changed by Mojang, there is absolutely no way for them to get the account back, meaning unless by some stroke of luck he got it unlocked, the name is lost forever with no way of it ever returning to the community. And by the way, I use Burbo as an example because it proves that Mojang doesn't just go after OG names. I should also mention here quickly that there is really no way to check if someone else's account is currently locked. It's almost entirely by word of mouth. There are a few ways to tell if you're familiar with the community, such as how FO's skin was reset to a Steve, or if it seems like it's been completely inactive after certain dates that I'll be talking about soon. Now, if I'm completely honest with you, it isn't often that Mojang locks accounts. It's just sort of as and when they find something suspicious. But in this war between the creators of the game and the community, there have been a few organized attacks on us, and of course, many cases when we fought back. So let's go right back to the beginning of 2016, when things in the community were a whole lot different. Early 2016 was a completely different time for the OG community. It's been described to me as the Wild West of Minecraft. Mojang was very relaxed on their TOS, meaning people could get away with a whole lot more stuff. At the time, the support system was super flawed and easy to fool. This meant that people were able to sell accounts and email Mojang with the TID to the account and say it had been hacked and stolen from them, and they would simply just be given the account back, in turn scamming the person they'd originally sold the account to. This is called pulling and can still technically be done now, but at the time it was a whole lot easier to do, as most of the time the support system didn't do any amount of background checking. This led to people going even as far as to have what I'll refer to as TID battles. While that may sound like some sort of game about popping balloons with monkeys, it actually involved multiple people repeatedly emailing Mojang with the TID requesting to have the account back, saying it was compromised, bouncing the account to and from a few different owners. This could go on plenty of times and Mojang wouldn't even bat an eyelid. It seemed as though they didn't keep any sort of logs on the database actions they made, or even on the emails they received, as they just repeatedly transferred ownership of certain accounts to different people over very short spaces of time. That may sound a little bit complicated, but this is really where the idea of scam accounts came from. People would sell accounts to people and pull it back over and over again without any repercussions. All of this is just evidence as to how messy Mojang's support was, but eventually this just turned out to be slowly poking Mojang to strengthen their system and improve the support, and is ultimately what caused their first attack on the community. Moving forward a little to one night in February 2016, everything in the community was completely fine, just as it always was. People had gone to bed the night before with their OG names on accounts completely secured. But upon waking up the next morning, many people had been logged out of their accounts and couldn't get back into them. Naturally, people immediately began to freak out. Mass panic ensued and people started messaging each other asking if they all had the same problem. Everybody with this issue was receiving the same error message, saying that their email or password was invalid. So people began to wonder what the issue was. Had someone hacked a bunch of accounts overnight? Was there a database leak, some sort of exploit, or even just a glitch locking people out of their accounts? Well, as people began to look more into it, when requesting a password reset, no email would be sent to you, but the real nail in the coffin was when people tried registering new accounts with their old emails. And it worked. This meant that both the email and password had been changed, which people seemed to find even weirder. Of course, many people contacted Mojang to see what was up, and all of them got the same reply asking for the transaction ID, which most people just couldn't provide, and even on the tiny off chance that they could, they were either asked more questions which again they couldn't answer, or they were just straight up refused access. To put it in simple terms, their accounts had been locked. But why did this all happen so suddenly? It was completely out of nowhere after Mojang had been so relaxed on the whole thing. Well, to understand that, we need to look about how the economy worked back then, and how the community worked when it came to OG names. Firstly, back in late 2015, early 2016, it hadn't been that long since name change day, when a whole lot of new OG names were introduced to the community. This meant that names really didn't cost that much at all back then. A name such as my own, Chucky, would have gone for around $25, and a top tier worth thousands now would have gone for a maximum of $200. At the time, because names were so cheap, it just wasn't worth buying a new Minecraft account or a gift code to put the name on. So people would just hack unmigrated accounts and snipe names onto those instead, because Mojang was just so relaxed about it. But over time, it seems as though Mojang finally did catch on to this. People began to realize that all the accounts that had been locked were these previously unmigrated accounts. It's important to mention that most of the accounts that got locked were owned by people that had migrated multiple accounts within a short time frame. It's also useful to note that, again, it wasn't just OG accounts that got locked in this wave. Many random accounts were also taken alongside the valuable ones. So, it was eventually concluded that Mojang did a database search that locked every account that was migrated on the same IP that 3 or more other accounts had also been migrated on. I realize that might sound kind of confusing and complicated, so in the simplest terms, if someone had migrated multiple accounts on the same IP in a short time frame, all of those accounts were locked. Now, I know I crap on Mojang a lot, but full credit to them, this method did work really well. No normal player would migrate multiple accounts on the same IP in such a short space of time. That would only be done by people who'd recently bought or cracked a bunch of accounts. And even if they did lock innocent accounts, the original owner could just email support with the TID and get their account back. Even to this day, migrating more than 2 accounts within 24 hours may still trigger the same warning to Mojang, but it's probably best that we don't try it out. Understandably, people were very annoyed about this. While many OGs were fine, there were hundreds that had been rendered completely useless. hundreds of so-called casualties. People voiced their annoyance on social media, and some people even confronted the Mojang staff IRL at Minecon 2016 in legendary videos like this.
Is this a support issue?
Yeah.
Okay,
like,
you should work with support on that. I stopped working for them a long time ago.
Wait, so the email.
They basically said that
You're
they
screwed.
locked my account.
They only do that when people are hacking accounts and selling them and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I didn't sell it.
Usually we only reply like that if someone's account has changed hands a bunch of times.
I mean, the name is LMAO.
Sure, but I gotta go with my friends though.
Alright.
Naturally, people began looking for ways to get their accounts back, and it didn't take long until something very important was found out. For a little bit of context, if you change the email of an account, you get sent a dispute link to your old email in case you'd made a mistake when typing the new email. If you click this link, it'll simply revert the email change and show you what it was changed from. But back then, it worked slightly different to now. There was no limit to how many times you could change your email, and the link you were sent each time lasted for 30 days regardless of if you changed your email in the meantime. So, soon after the lockwave happened, someone noticed that they'd recently changed the email to their account before it was locked. So, out of curiosity, they clicked the dispute link, and they were able to view the new email the account had been transferred to. And get this, the new email was literally just the same as before, but with -compromised at the end. And what's worse than that? Well, it turns out Mojang didn't even change the password on the account. So, you could literally just add -compromise to the end of your email and log into the account entirely normally. You could then change the skin, access servers, and most importantly, change the email back, unlocking your account instantly and with minimal effort. This was the first instance of the community being hit harshly by something Mojang did, but then retaliating quickly and bouncing back almost as fast as they'd fallen. But trust me, it would not be the last. Soon enough, however, Mojang realized their own mistake. They didn't do the database check for all the accounts that had -compromised in the email at any point, and reset the password of the accounts to something completely random that the owners would not be able to guess. Again, the changes were mainly done to accounts whose IP had multiple other accounts registered on them, just to make sure that they wouldn't unjustly lock innocent accounts. This did also let a few people slip through the cracks, but mostly all the accounts were relocked. And it stayed that way for quite a while, until again the community fought back and a much more private method was put into practice. Back at the time all this happened, if an account had security questions on it, you were able to visit a certain link which had you answer your security questions. And if you got them all right, you could move the account to a new email address. So people with locked accounts just sort of did that. People changed the email to something of their own and requested a password reset to the email address, once again regaining full control of their own account. The method was again only known to a very select group of people, but they often did it to their friends' accounts. So to be even safer this time, for every account unlocked, people would use a VPN to generate a separate IP so Mojang wouldn't be able to see that they were in fact saved by the same person, and this method worked beautifully. Most of the accounts that were unlocked then with this method are still safe to this day, but once again, full credit to Mojang, they did find a patch to this method, meaning that now the only way to unlock any of these accounts is by convincing Mojang that you are the original owner of the account, but more on that later. For now, let's talk about how this first lockwave affected the community and how this one attack led to thousands of names being lost forever. So, as I've mentioned already this video, if an account is locked, other than the few exploits and methods I've just talked about, you cannot access the account anymore. You can't change the skin, view the account details, or most importantly, change the name. Of course, locking was most common with OG names, as these were what got sold around the most. So, having your account locked was a lot more serious than just losing the Minecraft account you bought. You also lost a super rare and valuable name alongside it. But thinking about it, it wasn't just you that lost that name. It was the whole community that lost it, simply because, again, you just can't change the name anymore. This, in essence, is because the name is permanently assigned to an account that's basically just owned by Mojang, with only a very slim chance of it being returned. From this point on, many people contacted Mojang trying to get their account unlocked and received negative responses. And it was only then that people began to realize that it really was the end for those accounts. But it turns out that there was still a small glimmer of hope for the accounts. It seems that there is one way that these names can be retrieved, but sadly it's completely out of the community's hands. Remember how I said these accounts were just random hacked accounts with little else known about them? Well, because of this, many people didn't have any info on the creation date, location, and often transaction ID or OG email. This meant that trying to fool Mojang barely worked, as you just didn't have the info they needed. The only people who had that information were the original owners, but sometimes, very rarely, they did come back for their accounts. This is an incredibly rare occurrence for a number of reasons. First of all, the accounts had very low security levels, meaning the owners probably didn't care for them in the first place. So, for them to come back years later and bother creating a support ticket with Mojang is really unlikely. But for the times that it did, it went roughly like this. The original owner would contact Mojang and get a fairly commonplace response, asking for the TID of the account and what had happened to it. They would then likely be asked a few more questions, as they may have had logs from when it was locked for reselling, or when the OG community had tried to unlock it themselves. The OG owner would then answer all of the questions and the account would be unlocked. But what about the name? Well, Mojang as a company views all names and accounts exactly the same in situations like this, and so they would give the owner their original name back on the account, or at least something similar. Doing this would then finally free up the name for the community to take again using snipers or something similar. The best example of this I can think of is probably Cut. Looking at the NameMC page, you can see that the name was bot sniped onto the cracked account Sclerosis 2 months before the lock wave. Everything of course worked out completely fine until the account was of course locked, leaving the name and account to lay completely inactive for years to come. This was all until the original owner came back, contacted Mojang, and the name was changed to something similar to his old name, freeing up the name to then be gift code sniped in late 2019. Again, this is a super rare occurrence, but it is still possible, and yet sadly is the only real chance that remains for these names to be recovered. After all that had happened though, unmigrated accounts became much less commonly used for sniping names. Obviously, this was because people were worried about the whole locking fiasco, but also because so many accounts were locked in this period that it actually completely changed the whole economy for names in general. Before, OG names were still rare, but there was a whole lot of them around. After the locking though, almost all the names in the community became lost, making them a whole lot rarer. And because these names got rarer, they in turn become more valuable. So it started to become smarter to buy a fresh account or to use gift codes, instead of using cracked, unmigrated accounts. So this began to mean that way more of the OGs were originally owned by people in the community, rather than just some random inactive player. So while the 2016 lockwave was a massive hit to the community in terms of losing names, it also inadvertently created a new meta for everyone. It changed the economy up and hammered home to everyone that people had to be more careful with their accounts. Mojang had also stepped up the game with their support system in general too, so there were no more TID battles or anything like that, and scam accounts started to become a much rarer occurrence. And just generally, people became much more careful with how they handled accounts. But if you know anything about the OG community, you'd know that some people aren't always as smart as they need to be. So over the next few years, things continued as usual. Prices grew as normal, new names were bought into the community as usual through hacking or dropping, and Mojang's support system slowly ticked along, only locking accounts that were specifically brought to their attention. The 2016 lockwave also paved the road for the new method that Mojang used to go about locking sold accounts. Whenever they got a support ticket about an OG name, they'd immediately search it up on MCM to see if it had been sold, and if it had, it would instantly get locked. No second chances, and if anyone tried to appeal it, they'd get an almost automated response, stating simply that it will just not be given back to them. This carried on for the next 3 or so years, and people slowly began to forget and recover from the 2016 wave. This peaceful period, however, did not last forever. In November 2019, it was all shattered, when the second battle of the civil war between Mojang and the community began. Now, as I said, people had slowly begun to forget about the 2016 attack. People started to relax themselves slightly and adjust to the new system. Well, this did hold true for a long time, but there were still a few people that were concerned about the whole thing. In late October of 2019, a former staff member named Lotus made a suggestion thread stating that MCM should entirely ban the selling of Minecraft accounts. The thread brought up a few points as to why it would help the site, referencing how because it violates Mojang's TOS, it also inadvertently breaks the site's own rules, and just how it would better the site in general. While from a certain point of view his suggestions do make some amount of sense, the suggestion of course was incredibly badly taken. After all, the website is called Minecraft Market. Many people made most of their money off buying and selling these accounts on the website, and it was just generally the best place to find a rare account to buy. So the suggestion wasn't accepted, and the website went on as normal. Except very soon, it seemed that this suggestion would have been vital for preventing the second lockwave that Mojang would soon send. It looks as though a random Mojang employee had seen this thread, as very soon after it was posted, accounts started getting locked again. But this lockwave was a very different story to the last one for a few reasons. To start with, you need to remember that because the last wave was fully automated through database requests, all the accounts were mostly all locked in one day at almost exactly the same time. But with this lockwave, that was far from the case. Accounts were locked slowly, one at a time, over the span of multiple days and weeks. Again, thousands of accounts had been caught in this lockwave, all of which had been sold on MCM at some point. So why was this? What had caused so many OG name accounts to be locked in such a strange manner? Well, the answer is much simpler than you might be expecting. It was concluded that Mojang themselves had seen Lotus's post and then a short while later, sat down and simply just sifted through every single post on MC Market. They started with accounts on the front page listed very recently, all the way through to sales from well over a year ago from around summer 2018. This time again, they did absolutely zero background checking and used no amount of evidence other than the single MCM post. It was a completely ridiculous way of going about it, especially when you consider how well executed the last method was. The two methods couldn't have been more different, but I suppose this one worked so well because we weren't expecting it. Again, the community completely freaked out, but it didn't really take long for people to realize what was happening. People almost immediately figured out that it was accounts sold on MCM and began scrambling to delete the posts they made selling their accounts. Tons of people discussed what was happening in discords like OGN, talking about which accounts got locked, who was affected, and what the best way to defend yourself in the future may be. And there were even a few tragic messages that I look upon with a very heavy heart where people had just realized that their account had been locked forever. On a happier note though, a few people who I can't mention did manage to save their accounts by removing the posts, but by the time people had already realized, the damage had been done. It was reported that some people lost thousands of dollars in names. Some of the biggest sellers had their entire stock taken from them with nothing they could do about it. It also seemed as though this time it was literally only OG names that were targeted. One seller had multiple of his OG names locked, but the Minecon Cape account he was selling remained perfectly fine and untouched. And as always with events like this across the entire of the internet, people began to spread rumors and conspiracy theories. One of the most common was that the owners and admins of MCM had been paid by Mojang to do this for them, almost like a bribe to destroy the community from the inside. This theory was strengthened when MCM began to stop removing threads upon request, but it was eventually denied by the owners themselves and debunked. But there still remains a few theories that I and many people will take to the grave. Some people even speculated it could be the end of MCM as a whole, as many people were scared of using the site for fear of another wave. But eventually the site was put into a lockdown phase, and even now you're required to buy a special rank to even see the listings of Minecraft accounts. Obviously to prevent Mojangsters from passing by and just locking a few accounts. But moving away from the actual lockwave itself, what was the aftermath like this time? And did Mojang make any mistakes? Well, both answers are similar to that of 2016's lockwave. People were of course incredibly mad at Mojang, even more so than the first time, possibly because this wave was so much more personal and suspenseful. Instead of the last time where a bot had just gone through and locked a whole bunch of suspicious accounts, this was done by real people, slowly, one by one. For many it was almost torturous. They weren't able to get their posts removed and had no idea if and when their account might be locked. People were predicting the dates for possible future lockwaves with varying degrees of success, and overall it was an incredibly dark and bleak time for the community. But of course we were always looking for a way to fight back again, and get our accounts unlocked. But all of the old methods were patched and no new ones seemed to be presenting themselves. It got to a point where people were literally planning to raid and overthrow Mojang's HQ to get access to the database and unlock their own accounts. And just in case you had forgotten, these are Minecraft accounts we're talking about. You know, the block game? Yeah. I know I've been phrasing this whole story as a sort of war metaphor or something, but I am genuinely 100% serious about that part. But back to the whole lockwave side of things, there is one incredibly interesting and unfair thing that I want to quickly talk about. I mentioned that when Mojang locked accounts, they did absolutely zero background checking. And I mean that. This led to one of the biggest injustices I think I've ever come across in this community so far. Because Mojang had gone so far back in the site's history, there were a few cases of names that had actually been transferred onto fresh accounts, still owned by the OGO, which had never broken any rules. There are a few good examples, but this edited image that a friend of mine made describes it incredibly well. The account was listed and sold on MCM, the owner then changed the name, and it was claimed on a separate account. This new account hadn't broken any rules at all, but was locked by Mojang with no ways of being reinstated. The worst thing about this is that it could have happened to literally anyone who hand-sniped an OG name at the time, someone such as myself. Let's say the owner of the original Chucky account had sold it and then purposely changed the name to transfer it to a new account. I would then have hand-sniped it as I did and not broken any rules at all. But my account would still have been locked, and I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. The fact that this had happened to multiple accounts led to people messing with owners with fake screenshots like this to joke around with the owners, resulting in multiple different types of response. The massive injustice that I mentioned a minute ago though is the account Bowser, which had exactly that happen to it. The account was sold in MCM, transferred, but then intercepted by a hand sniper, and then just a few months later, the account was locked, and the owner hasn't been able to get it back since. If Mojang was to look at the registered IPs on the account, they'd easily be able to see this. So if there's any employees out there watching this, please give it a look, he did nothing wrong. But that is basically where the story ends for the second attack. Again, prices increased as accounts became rarer, and there were a few lucky people who did manage to get their accounts unlocked again, but most of the names that were taken in this lockwave seem to be gone for good. It really does seem a shame that there's a very good chance we won't be seeing such accounts such as Bobby or Poland or Argentina, or any of the thousands of other great names that were taken from us. So if you did make it this far in the video, please make sure to pay your respects in the comment section below. But apart from that, I really do hope you enjoyed the video. If you couldn't tell, I tried switching up the style of this video a little. It came out much longer than some of my others, but I am pretty proud of it. I'd love to hear your opinions on this new style in the comment section, but again, I want to give a big thank you to both Doge and Pussy for helping me out with the info and fact checking of this video, and also I want to give a massive thank you to my friend Cam or Pass who does all the audio editing for all my videos. It's a massive undertaking as I do mess up quite often, as you can see here. After all that had happened though, unmigrated accounts. And without him, these videos just wouldn't be able to be made. So please go ahead and subscribe to him with the link that'll be on screen. He genuinely really makes incredible videos and it would really help him out if you go and did that. But if you did enjoy the video, then please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.
Also, audio editor note thing? I don't know what you call it, but
everyone subscribe to me and subscribe to Chucky. Subscribe to them, get them to 30k so they can get that YouTube rank. But yeah, that's all I have to say.